Fuel shortages, empty shelves, medicine shortages, widespread public unrest. Not a vision from a dystopian Hollywood film, but the British government's own assessment of what a no-deal Brexit may look like. The planning scenario, codenamed Operation Yellowhammer, has now been published by the government weeks after being leaked to a newspaper and after opposition MPs forced its publication. The government says steps to mitigate the worst effects of Brexit will be published in due course. Vincent McAviney is our correspondent in London and he joins me now. Morning to you, Vincent. Now this information is public, just tell us, what are the government's reasonable worst-case planning assumptions for a no-deal Brexit?
Good morning, Rosie. Well, you can see why the government didn't want to release this. They were forced to on Monday night when MPs voted for it to be released by last night. And it has to be said, the first thing is when this government was leaked a few weeks ago to the Sunday Times, it was called base scenario. That means what the civil service simply expects to happen. It has now been released in full, and curiously, it is now titled worst case scenario. So there's a bit of dispute about what will actually happen. And the government at the time, it has to be said, also, it seems, lied. They said that it was an old document before Boris Johnson came to power. We now know that that definitely wasn't true. It was drafted around 10 days after the Prime Minister came into power. And as you mentioned there, food shortages, fuel shortages, medicine shortages, riots and civil disturbances, protests, the possible collapse of some care home industries, and a growing black market. These are all pretty dire consequences of a no-deal Brexit. The government is trying frantically now to say that they are getting prepared for. They're talking about the money that they've put in, talking about the advertising campaign. But it does show that many businesses simply aren't ready. There's a bit of fatigue when it comes to Brexit. There's still unclarity about the rules and what kind of relationship we have. So it seems pretty hard to prepare for something. And a key phrase that has to be picked out in this document is that it says that low-income groups will be disproportionately affected by any price rises in food and fuel. That is really being drawn out of this document, that the poorest in society are going to be hit hardest by a no-deal scenario.
MPs voted for the release of this information on Monday. That's not the only thing that they want to be made public. Not everything they want has been revealed. Can you tell us more?
Yeah, this is one of the problems of Parliament being prorogued, because MPs can't go to the Commons chamber today and demand answers from the government on this, because part of that vote was that communications between about 9 advisors who work here in number 10 Downing Street, including the Prime Minister's now famous advisor Dominic Cummings, on prorogation have been demanded. And it was very explicit. They wanted WhatsApps, Twitter DMs, Telegram messages, iMessages, all of that to be handed over. And the government has refused to, saying that it's not fair to do so, that they're claiming that that kind of communication isn't relevant. And one former special advisor, Amber Rudds, who lost his job recently when she resigned, said last night, "I'd rather put my phone in a blender than hand it over to Dominic Grieve." And there is a case here for privacy, but it shows as well that in this modern age, a lot of the rules when it comes to government communications, that it should be archived properly, simply aren't keeping up with the technology, because a lot of this kind of discussion has shifted onto personal platforms and encrypted platforms like WhatsApp. And so we'll see next week in the court case that moves to the Supreme Court whether or not there are any demands there to get hold of this communication to see why prorogation was decided, whether it was, as they claim, about having a Queen's speech, or whether it was, as the Scottish court said yesterday, to restrict Parliament and prevent scrutiny of the no-deal scenario.
Vincent McAviney, our correspondent live in London, thank you for that.